once we have completed chapter number 25, after that, rather than going for this speed presentation, PowerPoint presentation, teaching through PowerPoint presentation mode, I'll be playing the videos where you can see me writing the derivations, doing the problem in a copy. So, will it be fine to you all? Will it be okay to you all, or I need to teach in this way of PowerPoint? I just need your opinion. Yes, somebody please tell me. Some of you please respond. Yes. I mean to say that I will be playing the videos so that you can. Okay, Deepak. Okay, Deep, that's
It's
fine.
fine, sir.
Uh, yes, Shivam.
It's fine, sir.
Okay, so have you undergone such types of classes before, or will it be new to
Yes,
you
sir. In
all?
lab, you have done that.
Okay, yes, yes, of course I have done it. I just can't recall it. Okay, fine. So over there, exactly, but that is a little bit more precise. I mean to say that is recorded properly. I was holding the mobile in one hand, doing all the derivation in the copy. So I think most of this, because in the background I'll be there. So if you are having any sort of doubt, you just can raise your hand, or you just can just chat with me, so that I'll stop the video over there and I'll explain those points. But last year, students have enjoyed, but we were advised to teach in this PowerPoint presentation way. So that's why this year we have all planned to teach in this way. But I do think that that will be a little bit more beneficial to you all, because you will see me doing all the derivation. Because okay, it's all right. I have some pre-made slides for you all, but in that videos you will see me in the process of deriving. So I think that will be a little bit more convincing for you all, right? So maybe tomorrow we have a lab of 2 hours. So I don't have any, because no material is supplied to us to teach you in the lab. So I think in the lab I will be playing one such video. You just go through it. If you can enjoy it, then of course I'll from chapter number 26 onwards, I'll be using the videos. I will be playing those videos for you all. And after I will be the videos are each of 40 to 45 minutes. So that is the time bound is perfect. So 45 minutes I'll be playing the video. So whenever you are having any doubt, just note down the timing where you are having the doubt, or near to that timing. Suppose at 30th minute you are finding something odd, or you are finding something difficult to understand, just note down the time around this 30 minutes. Okay, so that after playing this video for 45 minutes, we'll be having another 15 minutes in our hand, and over there we'll be discussing those stuff, right? So I think that is okay, and that will be okay for you all. So that's why I talked beforehand, because otherwise I'll be preparing the slides. So if that is okay for you, then no need of preparing the slides from 26 chapter onwards. 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, and 32. But if you are having any sort of problem, then of course it is true that I will be preparing the slides. That is, I will act as a backup. And moreover, those notes also I can share with you all through the WhatsApp group or through your mail ID. So okay, let us see when the time comes. We'll put this into test. Okay. Okay, fine. So let us start our class. Quiz is there. I, after 2 weeks, actually, let me be frank to you all. I don't have any idea, but just a minute. Let me see, because coordinator sir has asked me to prepare some questions. Okay, let me see, because it was an open mail for all of us. Maybe he has asked us to prepare. Okay, just a minute. Please hold on. Let me check it out and tell you. So He has actually asked a few number of teachers to prepare questions. So I was assigned one chapter. Okay, let me see. My goodness, I just can't find out. Maybe up to chapter number 24. I'm not sure about it. Okay, so maybe up to chapter number 24. Maybe in the internal or the midsem, you will have your questions up to chapter number 26. I'm not sure about that, but that was a usual practice in the last year. So up to chapter 26, we have to cover for the midsem, and so I think this year also they may stick to that syllabus, right? Okay, so let us start our class. So last class we were talking about the various definitions of capacitor. So we have defined capacitor in three ways. So the one definition was a capacitor is a circuit element which is going to store the electrical energy in its by converting it to an electrostatic field between the two conductors, right? So that was one of the definitions. The next definition was any two conductors separated by an insulating medium. So we have any two type of conductor. The two conductors may be of the same material or maybe of different material, but they should be conductors. Okay, and in between the two conductors, if I am going to insert some dielectric material like your paper, oil, or mica or rubber, something like that, or even your air or vacuum can also act as a dielectric. The third one was it is a circuit element that opposes a change in the voltage. So this definition right now may not be of much use to you people, but when you will go to higher semesters in circuit theory, you will be making use of this particular definition quite frequently. And moreover, I have also given some examples. So when I was telling that any two conductors separated by an insulating medium is going to be a capacitor, over there I have given the example of your transmission and distribution conductors that run over the poles. Similarly, I have also given one example of a coaxial cable where you are having a copper conductor in the center over which there is a coating of a PVC material, and above that there is a mesh of aluminum wire. So aluminum and a copper, both of them are conductor, and in between them there is a PVC material. So in that way, your coaxial cable is going to behave like a capacitor. Next, I told you for this definition, which opposes a change in the voltage. Over there, I have given the example of your charger light. Okay, so when you will switch off the charger, the power LED that indicates the power is on is not going to diminish completely. It will take some time to completely the light to diminish. So in this way, we have defined all those three types of definitions of a capacitor. Now let us try to see or have some more insight into the capacitor, and let us try to learn what do we mean by capacitance. So over here I have also given, in the last class we have also talked about how actually the capacitor is going to work. Okay, so let us have a little bit of recap about that will refresh our understanding. So basically, as I told you, a capacitor is a device which is going to have two conductors separated by some insulating medium. So over here I was having one conductor P1 and the other conductor is P2. Both of them were initially uncharged. So when they are uncharged, on P1, both positive and negative charges are equal in number, and therefore P1 is electrically neutral. That means it is not going to have any net charge. Similar is the case with that of your P2. Now, when I am going to connect this capacitor with that of a battery, and which is having a positive terminal and a negative terminal. When the positive terminal is connected to P1, okay, so what happens? Now, the electrons which are present on this P1, they will get attracted and they will be transported, or it will try to move, or it will move along this wire towards the positive terminal of the battery. And I have told you when we are discussing about this electric potential difference, over there I told you that once electron reaches this positive terminal, because of the chemical reaction, that electron will be forced to move against the direction of the electric field inside the battery to the negative terminal. And when it is dumped at this negative terminal, because of the repulsion of other electrons, that electron will be forced to move towards this P2. Now in this one cycle, what are the changes that is taking place? Over there, P1 has lost one electron and it has gained one positive charge. And similarly, P2 has got one extra electron and it gets one negative charge over here. Now this process is not going to stop over here. This will continue till all the electrons present in P1 is going to be transported to that of your P2. That means at one stage or a stage will come when your conductor P1 will be full of positive charges, whereas your P2 will have excess number of negative charges. Now in this way you can see that P1 is going to gain a net positive polarity and P2 is going to be negatively charged. If these positive and negative charges are existing, so in between this positive or in between the area between the positive and negative conductor, obviously an electric field will be created. Now this whenever an electric field is created, it is because of the energy that is provided by this battery. Okay, so in other words we can say the energy given by the battery is stored inside the electrostatic field of the capacitor, of a charged capacitor. So when an electric field is going to exist between your P1 and P2, so obviously there will also be a potential difference that will exist across this P1 and P2. Because we have already learned that if there is an electric field and the charges are transported, then obviously there will be some work done, and that work done per charge is nothing but your potential difference. So ultimately we came to the conclusion that when we are going to connect a battery to that of a capacitor, the capacitor is going to gain the energy of the battery and store it in the form of an electrostatic field between the two conductors. And in this process, since an electric field is created, therefore a potential difference will also be created across this P1 and P2, right? So once this potential difference is existing, now if I will remove this battery and in place of battery I will just connect it directly, short circuit the battery, and there is a resistance over here, then what is going to happen? This is going to be a closed circuit, and since P1 is having positive polarity and P2 is having negative polarity, therefore this is going to behave like an energy source and therefore a current will start flowing. So when a current is going to flow through this resistance, this resistance is nothing but a load, let us say, then obviously it is going to do some work. So when it is going to pass through this resistance, some form of heat is going to be dissipated. So in this way, a capacitor is going to get charged and it is going to get discharged. So this is the process of charging, and this is how discharging of a capacitor takes place. So with this much knowledge, we can proceed further. So if there is any doubt, please ask me. Is there anyone with any sort of doubt?
Yes, sir.
Yes, please tell me.
Sir, what kind of wire we are using?
Yes?
What kind of wire we are using?
Simple wires. Simple
Sir,
wires.
in simple wires there will be some kind of resistance, no sir? Then how it?
Okay, I got
Then
your point.
it will itself act as a load.
Okay, now let me tell you one thing. It's a good question, no problem. Now you see this wire, right? It is going to have a resistance of 0.0001 ohms. So do you think that this one, okay, suppose let us say the current that is going to flow is 1 ampere. Now, what is the, suppose let us say this wire is directly connected without this resistance, right? Now, as I told you, this total wire is going to have a resistance of 0.0001 ohms, right? Now, what will be the loss? The loss is nothing but I square R, right? Now, if I will multiply this, I is nothing but 1 ampere, let us say. And remember, 1 ampere is not a small ampere, it is quite a big ampere. Even your, let us say, loads like your refrigerator is not going to draw 1 ampere. It is maximum going to draw around 0.6 or 7 ampere, 0.67, something like that, but not 1 ampere. So 1 ampere is quite a large ampere. Okay, fine. Now, 1 I square R is the total losses in the wear, let us say. Now, what is the value of I? The value of I is 1. So 1 square is again 1. Now multiply it with R. Now how much is R? It is 0.0001 ohms. So what is the loss? The loss is equal to 0.001 watt. So do you think this much heat can be detected? It can never be detected even in the wear. That means if the wear is carrying 1 ampere of current, then also the loss is so small that we don't take it as a loss. We neglect this loss. Okay, got the idea?
But sir, I was asking that if there will be some kind of resistance in that wire, then the charge stored in the capacitor will be discharged and there will become again neutral, no?
Yes, okay. So I told
Then
you now.
without
Yes.
without
Tell me.
using any load, then it will charge and discharge immediately. So how the capacitor will store
No,
the
no, no, no,
charge
no.
for?
Just a minute. So let us see what actually a capacitor looks like. Okay, let me show you. So here you are having a capacitor, right? So this is one conductor. This is one terminal. So this one is one terminal. This is the other terminal. Okay. Under normal condition, okay, this capacitor is fully charged. Is it connected in any way? Is these two conductors connected to each other? No, they are not connected. So if they are not connected, then it is an open circuit and therefore there will be no flow of current, right? If there is no flow of current, there is no loss. So the capacitor is going to store the charge. But let me be frank to you all. Truly speaking, suppose I am having this capacitor and let us say this is the positive terminal and this is the negative terminal. Both of them are open. Therefore, ideally we will say that no, there is no, since the two terminals are not connected to each other directly or through any resistance, therefore it is an open circuit, and in open circuit no current flows, and if no current flows then there will be no loss, and therefore the capacitor is going to remain charged, fully charged for time infinite. But this is never the case, because this is only possible if this capacitor is completely ideal in nature. And right from beginning I have been telling you, no component in this engineering world is ideal in nature. Whether it is resistance or it is inductor or it is a capacitor, nothing is ideal. Now what is actually going to happen? Just look over here. So this conductor is connected to P1, let us say, and this one is connected to P2. And in between them, there is some dielectric material like this. Now what is actually going to happen? Let me tell you. Now obviously this dielectric material is an insulator, so the current cannot move, or these two are insulated from each other because there is an insulator over here. But the container, now you see, this is the coating. Now this container itself is made out of aluminum, and believe me, there will be some sort of leakage path or some sort of leakage, means very small high resistant path through which this one and this one will be connected to each other. Just see, I have used the dotted lines. So this is the negative terminal and this is the positive terminal. Well and good, both of them have been charged and they are open. So one will say that since they are open, no current is going to flow, so there will be no loss in the power, or there will be no discharging in this capacitor since it is open. But the truth is that over here, this entire capacitor arrangement is placed inside an aluminum tubing, right? So this conductor and this conductor, there will be a very high resistance path which we sometimes tell it as a leakage resistance. Okay, so due to this leakage resistance, this one will come in contact with the outer coating, and this one is again going to come in contact with the outer coating. So ultimately these two are short circuited, or not short circuited, these two are connected through the aluminum tubing, and this path is going to have a very high resistance. So when the resistance is very high, obviously the current is going to be very small. So if current is very small, naturally the losses are very small. Okay, so either way you will see that this conductor is not going to hamper the discharging, or it is not going to decrease the amount of charge that the capacitor is going to throw or store. Got it? Or once again I'll explain.
Got it, sir.
Okay, fine. So this is the process. Now let us see. Actually, till now we have been talking about capacitor. Now the capacitor word comes from the word capacity or capacitance. Okay. Now let us learn what is this capacity. The capacity of means how much is the potential of this capacitor to store some energy. Okay. So when we are talking about capacity, the term which is going to express the capacity of this type of arrangement is known as capacitance. So whenever we talk about a capacitor, we actually refer to the capacitance of the capacitor. So let us try to see what is this capacitance. Now we all know, or previously we have already studied, that your potential difference VAB is equal to E, that is your electric field, and multiplied with the distance separating the two conductors. Okay. Now VAB is equal to E dot D, right? Because even if your E vector and D, both of them are vector, electric field and your distance, both of them are vectors, still then since it is a dot product, VAB is going to be a scalar quantity. So rather than using vector notation, I have used your scalar notation over here. So we know that VAB is equal to electric field into your distance between the two conductors. Okay. Now this electric field is directly proportional to Q. Many a times we have studied for a point charge, for a set of n number of point charges. So every time we have studied that your electric field is directly proportional to your charge stored. Okay. So if VAB is proportional to E and E is proportional to Q, so simple logic will say that VAB is proportional to Q. Okay. So that means if the potential difference applied across the terminals of the capacitor is going to increase, then obviously the charge that is going to be stored in the capacitor is also going to increase. Okay. Or in other words, or vice versa, we can also say if the charge in the capacitor is very high, then the potential difference is also high. Clear? So if this is the case, then obviously there will be a constant of proportionality, and that constant of proportionality is nothing but your C, or the capacitance of the capacitor. So ultimately, with a little bit of mathematical manipulation, we came to the conclusion that capacitance of a capacitor, any type of capacitor, is given by Q by the potential difference. Okay, that means suppose there is a capacitor over here, and there are two terminals. Okay, now this is the positive terminal and this is the negative terminal, right? Now suppose I know that this capacitor is going to hold maximum 100 coulombs of charge, right? 100 coulombs of charge, and let us say the potential difference between these two is measured by a voltmeter, and let us say it is equal to 1 volt, right? So if this is the case, then the capacitance is equal to 100 farad, because the unit of capacitance is farad. Okay, so 100 coulombs divided by 1 volt is equal to 100 farad. So in this way, we can define the capacitance as the ratio between the charge stored in the capacitor to the potential difference across the two terminals of the capacitor. Okay, so very simple thing. your potential difference is directly potential difference across the two terminals of the capacitor. Okay, so these are the two, because every time a capacitor is a two terminal device, all the basic electrical devices like resistance, inductor and capacitor, all these three are two terminal devices, right? So the potential difference across the two terminals of the capacitor is equal to the electric field that is existing inside the two conductors multiplied with the distance between the two conductors. So VAB is equal to E into D. Now VAB is it clearly shows that your VAB is proportional to E, which is again proportional to Q. Now VAB, obviously by simple logic, we can say that VAB is proportional to the charge stored. So if there is a direct proportionality, then there is a constant of proportionality that will exist. So your Q is equal to CVAB. So ultimately we come to the conclusion that your capacitance of a capacitor is the ratio between the charge stored inside the capacitor to the potential difference across the two terminals of the capacitor. Okay. Now, what are the basic notes? So greater the capacitance, greater is the charge stored. Simple thing. C is directly proportional to Q. You can see from this equation. So greater the capacitance, greater is the charge stored on the conductors, and greater is the energy stored in the capacitor, because we have already studied that potential energy is directly proportional to the charge stored. So naturally, if capacitance is high, then Q is going to be high, and if Q is going to be high, obviously the energy stored in the capacitor is also going to be high. Next, since PE, that is your potential energy, is directly proportional to Q, hence capacitance may be defined as the ability of the capacitor to store energy. Okay, so when from the very beginning we have been talking that, or in +2 usually the students learn that a capacitor is a circuit element that stores energy or stores charge. Now over here it is proved, because now as your potential energy is directly proportional to Q, therefore we can say the capacitance is nothing but the ability of the capacitor to store energy. So this, from where this energy is coming, that is clarified in the third point. The capacitor stores this energy received from the charging source in the form of electric field. So the battery is charging the capacitor. So actually what the battery is doing, battery is nothing but an energy source. It is a voltage source. So that energy source is actually giving some energy to the capacitor. Now, how obviously the energy inside the capacitor, it is not storing in the form of electrical energy or chemical energy. It is actually storing it in the form of a field. Okay, because if you can recall that in the very first class, the first class I took, I have defined five types of quantities: scalar, vector, phasor, tensor, and field. So always remember that field is also a dimension quantity, dimension wala quantity. Okay, that means like your scalar quantity, there is something known as a field quantity. Okay, so you may not see a field, you cannot see a gravitational field, but you can very well feel it. Similarly, you cannot see an electrical field, but you can feel it. So in this way, the energy, obviously inside the battery, some chemical reaction is taking place, and this is producing electrical energy. Now this electrical energy is transported or is transferred to the capacitor, and this capacitor is going to store this energy in the form of a electric field, or rather I will say electrostatic field, because this field is going to remain constant with respect to time for a long period. Is there any doubt?
Sir, in the first
Okay.
point, it is written that capacitance is directly proportional to charge.
Okay. Yes.
Sir, then the charge that in the third equation from the above, it is written that potential difference is directly proportional to Q.
Hmm.
then that capacitance, then it implies that capacitance
Is
becomes directly
inversely
proportional to
proportional
V.
to is inversely proportional to Q. Okay,
No,
that is the
no,
problem.
yes, sir.
Yes.
My
I
problem is
got it.
that.
Okay, no problem. Let me clarify it. Okay. Now, over here, what is written? Greater the capacitance, greater is the charge stored in the conductor, and greater is the energy stored in the capacitor. Okay. This is what is confusing you. Which point is actually confusing you?
Sir, all the summing up all
Acha,
the
acha, I
points.
got it. So this equation is actually troubling you, right?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Let me tell you what I actually mean. So there is a capacitor over here. So you are transporting the energy from a source. So let us say this is a DC source. It is having some electrical energy. So one of this wire is connected to this terminal, the other wire is connected to this terminal. So the energy starts flowing. I am not drawing the direction of the charge, I am drawing the direction of the energy. So energy from this one is getting stored in the form of electric field over here. So as the electric field keeps on as the energy is being transported, the amount of charge Q on each side keeps on increasing. Okay, this and Q gets increased or it starts increasing up to the maximum value, and in the process when Q is increasing, the electric field magnitude is also increasing. Okay, so ultimately after some time when the capacitor is fully charged, let us say the total charge on the positive conductor is Q and on negative it is minus Q. So the maximum value of this electric field is E, right? Now you will disconnect this wire. If you will disconnect this wire and you will measure the voltage, then it is going to give you a potential difference VAB. Okay, please look over here. Now a voltage V was previously given to you, because unless and until there is a potential difference, okay, no current or no charge is going to flow in this circuit. And once there is no potential difference, there is no current in the circuit, then the capacitor cannot get charged. Please try to understand what I mean. Previously, okay, when I am applying the voltage, right? So this voltage V is directly proportional to E, right? Oh, sorry, just a minute. Your electric field is directly proportional to the applied voltage V. Okay? Are you getting what I'm saying? Just try to understand.
Yes,
There
sir.
are two voltages. One is the voltage of the source, the other is the voltage of the across the terminal of the capacitor. Now, what happens initially? Suppose let us say the battery is having a voltage of 12 volt, right? Now, what happens initially? The voltage across this capacitor VAB is not 12 volt. It will start from 0 volt and slowly it will increase. So 0 volt, 1 volt, 2 volt, like this. After some time, it will reach 12 volt. So when it reaches 12 volt, naturally the potential difference between the capacitor that is acting as a load and the source that is your battery is same. So when the potential differences is same, no current is going to flow, and we will say that the capacitor is fully charged. Are you getting what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now what happens? Once I start giving V, okay, your electric field starts creating inside it. Now look, here I am applying V, but here I am writing VAB. Why? Because this VAB is nothing the voltage across the terminals of the capacitor, not across the or the voltage of the source. The voltage of the source is V, whereas the voltage across the terminals of the capacitor is VAB. So VAB will start increasing, means your E is increasing. Why is increasing? Because your Q is increasing. Got the idea? So when Q is increasing, your E is increasing, that is the electric field is increasing. And when electric field is increasing, the potential difference across the two terminals of the capacitor is increasing. but at the same time your V is remaining constant at 12 volt. Are you getting what I'm saying? Or once again I will tell you.
Sir, actually, I was
Uh,
asking
uh,
that C is directly proportional to Q
C
and
is
Q is
directly
directly proportional
proportional
to
to Q, right?
Q. Yes,
Uh,
sir. And Q is directly proportional to VAB.
oh, I'm sorry. This should have been written simple V. Okay,
Yes, sir.
fine.
That was my confusion. Okay, I got
Okay,
it
okay.
now.
I got it. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, actually pointed out the right thing. Okay, okay, I got it, got it. So there is a confusion. Okay, is there anyone who has not understood what we are discussing? Let me clarify that thing. Yes, yes. Is there anyone? Because this is a very
Sir,
good doubt
then,
you have asked me.
sir, then in above equations also, it should be V, only V, no?
No, 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 no. In the above equation, it is absolutely correct. Okay, let me tell you why. Let me tell you why. That means you have not understood what I actually meant to say. Okay, once again, I am telling you. Very good question. Try to understand it. Okay, so I am having a battery over here. The battery is going to have a constant potential difference V, right? Now this one is going to charge a capacitor over here. Now initially the value of the voltage across the two terminals of this capacitor was 0. Okay. But this V is constant. You got what I am saying? The voltage applied across the capacitor, because you all know that capacitor is a circuit element that opposes a change in the voltage. So when I have applied a voltage to the terminals of the capacitor, so initially it was at 0 volt, suddenly it will not become 12 volt. Got it? One by one, step by step I am explaining. Are you getting what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So initially the capacitor was completely uncharged. Okay. So the voltage across the two terminals of the capacitor was equal to 0. Now we have learned that a capacitor is a circuit element that opposes a change in the voltage. So when I applied the voltage source to the capacitor in order to charge it, so the voltage across this terminals of the battery is 12 volt, let us say. So suddenly the voltage across the two terminals of the capacitor VAB, let us say VC is the, okay, this is Vs, that is the voltage of the source, and this is Vc, the voltage of the capacitor across the two terminals of the capacitor. Now throughout the entire process of charging, the voltage across this is 12 volt, whereas your Vc is going to increase from 0 volt to 12 volt in some time. Instantly it will not become 12 volt. So slowly it will follow a relay graph like this and it will become 12 volt. Okay. So if this is your T versus the VC, then the graph will look something like this, and we will learn about this graph in chapter number 27. Okay. Now, so what is actually happening? When I'm applying a voltage, what happens? First, your Q starts increasing, okay? Because the energy is going to be transferred from this source to this capacitor in the form of transfer of charge. Are you getting what I'm saying? Second step. This is the second step. Tell me yes or no.
Yes, sir.
Okay, please respond because I need to know that you are understanding or not. So the first step is I applied a voltage source Vs to the capacitor. The voltage having a voltage Vs which is equal to 12 volt, and this 12 volt is going to remain constant throughout the charging process. Whereas the voltage across the terminals of the capacitor Vc is going to increase in a gradual manner, or rather I will say in an exponential manner, from 0 to 12 volt. So how actually this entire scenario is going to work? The voltage source Vs is going to charge the capacitor by depositing or transporting the charges from one conductor to the other. That means I will say initially what will happen, the Q will start increasing. the transfer of Q will start increasing. So once this Q starts increasing, then obviously your electric field is dependent on this Q. So this electric field will also start increasing, okay, in a gradual exponential manner. Now, when this electric field is going to increase, now you know, rather writing VAB, I'll write VC over here. So I'll write BC over here. Okay. So this BC, which is again directly proportional to your electric field, will also start increasing, right? So at least I can say that when the charge is increasing, the potential difference across the two terminals of the capacitor BC is also increasing. Okay. So if this is the case, then obviously the charge transported in the capacitor, inside the capacitor, and the potential difference that is developed across this capacitor VC, both of them are going to increase, or rather I will say your charge that is transported in this capacitor, so that one of the plates is having a charge of Q and the other one is having a charge of minus Q, is equal to Q by V. Okay, so what is this Q? Q is the total charge that is transported. And what is this V? This V? V is the voltage across the two terminals of the capacitor once the capacitor is fully charged. Okay, got this? Now, these
Yes, sir.
are the intermediate or transient processes. These are taking completed. Finally, we are arriving at this equation. So this is the final value, because when you will apply a voltage, the capacitance suddenly is not going to show you 1 microfarad. So it will take some time, because the charge needs to be transported from one conductor to the other. And when the charge transportation is taking place, it has not reached the, okay, just see. Previously, as I told you, please try to understand it, because I'm explaining, I'm trying to explain it in the best possible way. So suppose, let us say this one is having a maximum of 10 electrons, and therefore what is 10 electrons and 10 protons, let us say 10 positive charge and 10 negative charge. So what will happen? First one electron will move, so this one will become 9, or rather I will say it has become 1 plus, and this has gained 1 extra electron, therefore this will become 1 minus. Next, what will happen? Another electron will move, then it will become 2, then this one will become minus 2. In this process, after some time, now in this process you will see previously one electron was transferred. Let us say the voltage was equal to 1 volt. So when two number of electrons have been transferred, the voltage becomes 2 volt. So in this way, after some time, we will say that the left hand conductor has gained a 10 plus, and this one has become 10 minus, and the potential difference now is equal to 10 volt. Got the idea? I am giving a hypothetical example. So as you see, when I am finally interested to say what is the capacitance, I will not look at 1 amp or 2. Rather, I will say after I have achieved the total number of charge, or total how much amount of charge has been transported, it is 10. Now, what is the potential difference that has already developed across this? That is also 10. So what is the capacitance? That is equal to 1 farad. Okay. Now, this intermediate, at this intermediate stage also, it is going to show you 1 farad, but the real capacitance value is always indicated as the final voltage, because you will see, just have a look, I will tell you, because these are very important things you need to understand. Now let us see a capacitor. Let us see a capacitor. So let us see a Keltron capacitor. Okay. Okay, so this one. Okay, what you are seeing? Just have a look at this. 1000 microfarad. Okay, and this is given 35 volt. Okay. Now, obviously, this capacitor will start when it is completely discharged, its voltage is equal to 0 volt. But when it is going to be charged, slowly, it will, the voltage across the two terminals will increase. And at one point, when it is completely or it is fully charged, the voltage across the two terminals will be 35 volt. Got the idea? Are you getting what I'm saying? So
Yes, sir.
whenever you are going to buy a capacitor, the shopkeeper will ask you what rating of the capacitor you want. You will tell that I require a 1 microfarad capacitor. You will tell no, 1000 microfarad is okay, but what is the voltage? Then you have to mention, say, I require 16 volt, or I require 25 volt, or I require 35 volt, or I require 40 volt, or I require 72 volt, or I require 100 volt. So you have to mention two things, because a capacitor has three types of rating, or it comes with three ratings, out of which two are most important. One is the voltage rating, the other one is the capacitance of the capacitor. Okay? So everything you understood or not?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I also enjoyed clearing your doubt, because I know these things will create confusion, but till now nobody has asked me this confusion. It clearly shows you are trying hard to understand. That's good. I'm very happy. Thank you. Okay. So ultimately, we will say that C is equal to the total charge divided by the final voltage that is available across the two terminals of the capacitor. Okay? Everybody clear about this? Or is there any more doubt? Yes? Okay, fine. So everybody have understood. That's great. Next. So, what are the various types of capacitor? Okay, just have a look. Depending on the geometry means shape, size of the capacitor. Depending on the geometry, we have three types of capacitor: parallel plate, cylindrical, and spherical. Depending on the dielectric used, so we have some capacitors known as air core capacitor, we have oil filled capacitor, we have electrolytic capacitor, we have plastic capacitor, we have mica capacitor, we have oil impregnated paper capacitor. So depending on the type of dielectric, we also classify the capacitor. Similarly, depending on the voltage rating also, we differentiate the capacitors as low voltage, medium voltage, and high voltage capacitors. For example, in the fan, that the capacitor that is used is 2.5 microfarad, and its voltage rating is 400 volt, and it is an electrolytic capacitor. Okay. Now, there are certain other capacitors which are also classified on the basis of their thermal rating. So, Y class capacitor, then we have Y class, then we have B class capacitor. All these capacitors, particularly the thermal rating of the capacitors, are used in industries where they are subjected to very high temperatures. Okay. For example, in case of your smelter plants, you are going to have some sort of capacitors for the heater coils. Now, heater, as you will say, it is going to be a resistive load. Why we require a capacitor? Okay. In case of heater coils, they are made in the form of coil, and when it is a coil, it is going to have some inductance. And in order to cancel those inductance, I need some capacitor. And obviously, since these smelter plants, they are operating at very high temperature. Okay. Therefore, we have to go for very industrial high rating thermal capacitors. So depending on various factors, we can classify the capacitors. But over here in your course, we have only one classification, basis of classification, that is the geometry or the shape of the capacitor. So on the basis of geometrical construction, your capacitors are classified into three types. Yes?
I have a question. So,
Yes, of course.
inductance is very low in
Yes,
case of
inductance.
that heating coil.
क्या हुआ?
The inductance is very low in case of that heating coil.
Yes.
The inductance is very low in case of that heating coil. So
Yes.
why can't we neglect that?
No, just look. When we are dealing, just let me tell you. Now, in case of your domestic heater coils, okay, you will have a coil like this made out of nichrome wire. Okay. Okay, fine. Now, always you will see that these are means constructed in the form of coil. Can you tell me why they are made in the form of coil? The answer is very simple. R, because we want to increase the resistance of this heating coil. Because R is equal to rho L by A. So I want to increase the length. Now, obviously, if I will increase the length, means the shape of the heater is going to be very large. So rather we coil it so that the length is reduced and the heater becomes compact. Now, but whenever you are going to coil a conductor, it is going to give you some inductance. Now, obviously, in domestic heaters, we are not using such large amount of or large length of heating element. But in industries, you will see that, or if you will ever visit some industry, you will see the smelting or the melting pots, they are going to have very thick coil, means they are going to have very thick conductor which are made in the form of coil, because over there also we want to increase the length as well as we want to make it compact. Secondly, if we don't make it compact and make it very large, the surface area will become large, and when the surface area is going to be large, the amount of heat loss is going to be large. So what we usually do, thick wires we will be using. Okay, now the fundamental thing is that in case of heater coil, we always prefer this length to be large and area to be small. But in case of industrial heaters, we want the length to be high as well as the area to be high as well. Why? Because if the area is not very high, then the coil at some point can also melt by itself. So in order to prevent that, we make use of hollow conductors in the form of coil. So you will actually have a tube-like thing like this, which is actually made into a coil. So the coil looks something like this. Okay. So in this way, you are increasing the area as well as the length of the conductor. Now, if this is the case, then obviously this type of construction of even your nichrome coil is going to give you appreciable value of inductance as well as capacitance. Got it?
Sir, if it is hollow in between, if
Yes.
it is a hollow tube, the inductance will increase a lot.
Yes, that is what I am telling. And why we make it hollow? Because if we don't make it hollow, then there is every chance that this coil will melt by itself. Okay. So usually we make it hollow. Hmm. Yes. What else you have? Doubt?
No, sir. My
Okay.
doubt is clear now.
Sir, I
Okay,
have a
fine.
doubt.
Yes, tell me. Tell
Sir,
me.
you told that in fan capacitor there is it's a 400 volt, and
Huh?
in switch boards it is 200 volt. That source is it is.
Acha, okay, I got it, I got it. You are telling that the voltage supply is 230 volt, but I am saying that it is the fan capacitor that I am using is 2.5 microfarad, and why it is not 250 volt or 230 volt, but it is 400 volt. Is it your doubt?
Yes, sir.
Is this your doubt? Okay, very simple. When we will study about AC, or you have some idea that AC is a sinusoidal waveform like this, right? And sinusoidal waveform has three types of voltage ratings. One is the instantaneous voltage, the other one is the RMS voltage, and the last one is the maximum or the peak voltage. Okay. Now, 230 volt is known as the RMS voltage, but every equipment, whether it is a capacitor or an insulator, they're always designed to designed on the basis of maximum voltage. Now, in case of a 230 volt supply, the maximum voltage that this sinusoidal waveform will reach is given by 230 multiplied with root 2. Okay. So if we'll calculate this one, this is coming as 390 volt, which is very close to 400 volt. Got it?
Yes, sir.
That is why we rate these types of capacitor at 2.5 microfarad and 400 volt. In case of three phase, it is more than, it will be around 600 volt. Even though in three phase also you are going to get 400 volt, because 400 multiplied with root 2 is going to give you something around 600. So in this way, we used to rate the capacitors. Actually, it is not 600, it is 650 volt in case of three phase supply. Okay, fine.
Sir, what is the peak in 220 volt supply?
220 volt supply. Whenever you want to find the peak of any sinusoidal voltage, just multiply it with root 2. So if you are asking what is the peak
Okay,
value
sir.
of 220 volt RMS voltage, then just multiply it with root 2. Okay. So whatever you are going to get, that is going to the maximum voltage that that instrument is actually facing. So if you get a shock, don't think that it is 230 volt that you are getting. It is actually 390 volt that you are getting, because at every 0.002 second, because it is 50 hertz, no, so it will reach the peak at 0.002 second. So for every 0.002 second, you are actually getting 390 volt as a shock voltage. Okay. So that is known as peak voltage. So when we will go to 31st chapter, we'll study about this AC in detail, where we'll study about instantaneous voltage, RMS voltage, peak voltage, average voltage, all this thing we'll study. Okay, so today the time is off. Now we'll stop the class over here. In the next class, we'll study about this capacitor. Then we'll study about this derivation. Some problems we'll do. And let me tell you one thing. Tomorrow we are going to have the lab, but I don't have any material with me to show you. So I'll be taking your class for around 1 or 1.5 hours, right? So please be prepared for this. So please remain online. Let me take a screenshot. Okay. Thank you. Have a nice time.
Hello students, good afternoon to all of you. Last lecture I have done 2.2. Any doubt in that? Explained about number of spanning tree, counting the number of spanning tree. The first method is just to draw it and count it, right? And another is by recurrence method, that is edge contraction method. And third one was matrix tree computation, right? Can you tell me how to explain this matrix tree computation and edge contraction method? Yes, tell me. Number of spanning tree, that is denoted by tau g, by edge contraction method, how we find it, and by using matrix tree computation. Anyone? Yes? Tell me, otherwise quiz ले लूंगी.
Ma'am, number of spanning tree in graph G is equal to number of spanning tree in graph T minus G minus E plus
Yes.
spanning tree of contacted edge, that is G dot E.
Yes. And what about matrix tree computation? How we counted it? Found some matrix. How?
Ma'am, there are two parts in that. If I not equal to J, then we take minus of adjoint minus of AI.
AI
Yes.
agents.
And if I is equal to J, then we take degree of that.
AI is equal to J, then degree of that particular vertex.
Yes, ma'am.
And what is this AIJ?
Ma'am, Aij is number of adjacent edges on that vertex.
That is giving you degree. Number of incident edges to that vertex is giving you degree, na? Good AIZ.
Sorry, ma'am. Sorry. Ma'am, it is let's say
Let's say VI and VJ vertex modeling.
and they are adjacent to each other, then we write one, because
Okay,
there is one edge between them.
okay, so means to say AIJ is the number of edges between ith and jth vertex, right? And minus of that. So we found this matrix. This will be n by n matrix Q. Suppose we denoted it by Q, na? N cross n matrix. If n vertices are there, then what we did?
And we found the determinant of matrix by deleting the row and column.
Yes, delete any one row and any one column. So suppose ith row and jth column you are deleting. So on jth column, what do you get? You get Q star, that will be n minus 1 cross n minus 1 matrix. Clear?
Yes, ma'am. Minus one.
Determinant of this one can either be negative or positive, right? Means to say minus 1 raised to power I plus j, whatever you have deleted ith row and jth column, into determinant of Q star. This is given by your tau of G, that is number of spanning tree of G. Okay, this is useful if you have total number of vertices, or you can just say order of the graph is at most 5 तक तो calculate कर सकते हो determinant, right? After 5 it is very cumbersome task, right? So if you have more than 5 vertices, you can go for this one. Okay?
Ma'am,
Yeah.
ma'am, how to calculate a determinant of 4 cross 4 or 5 cross 5 manually?
Same as you determine the matrix for 3 cross 3. How you determine for 3 cross 3? Suppose you have A11, A12, A13, A21, A22, A23, right? And here A31, 32, and 33. How you determine?
A11 into A2 minus A3 into minus
Yes,
minus A3.
the first element into what is this? What A2 into there is A22 into A33 minus A32 minus this one. So that is the determinant of this matrix, no? Or you can just say cofactor of this one. And not cofactor, determinant actually. This one and the A11 into by deleting this row, this column and this row, whatever the remaining matrix 2 by 2, for that we are taking the determinant 2, 3, A32 and A33. Okay. So determinant of 2 by 2, this into this minus this into this, right? Then this one is minus 1 raised to power 1 plus 1. So that is positive. Next one will be plus minus 1 raised to power 1 plus 2. Okay, I and Z. In general, it is plus minus 1 raised to power I plus j. So for 1 and 2, it will be minus 1. Minus 1 into aij, that is a1, 2. Delete this one and take the determinant of remaining. The rest will be a21, a31, and here a23, a33, right? This into this minus this into this, right? That will be determinant. And then plus minus 1 raised to power 1 plus 3, that is plus 1 only, into a13 and the determinant of this one, right? This matrix. Similarly, for a14, it would be here a14, a24, and here a41. So what do you do? First one, delete this one, take the determinant of this one, then minus a12, delete these one corresponding row and column, and take all 3 by 3 determinant plus a13, deleted corresponding row and column, and whatever the remaining entries, take the determinant, and then minus a14, delete the corresponding row and column, and there,
Okay, ma'am.
that's how you can calculate the determinant for 4 cross 4, and similarly for 5 cross 5. So that's why I just told you that up to 5 you can calculate it. After 5 it will be very, very difficult, because for every entry you need to calculate the determinant and then multiply, right?
Yes, ma'am. And then what is the other way to solve that?
This one by S contraction method.
Okay.
Okay. Try to delete that S so that you know the number of spanning tree corresponding to that. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
That was 2.2. Now it's 2.3. That is optimization in spanning tree, or you can say optimization in trees. Here we have discussed about number of spanning tree corresponding to kite, right? How many? How many spanning tree we calculated for? 8, right? And if I just extend this one more vertex and S, how many spanning tree for this one? Again 8. This edge will be there, right? In every spanning tree, right? This is a bridge now, and bridge to present right? So 8 number of spanning tree exist for this graph as well. And if you take this one, again 8, this one again 8, this one again 8, right? Until and unless you are not increasing any cycle, the spanning tree will be remaining same, right? 8 number of spanning tree exists for this type of graph, and this is given in this one, right? So out of these, which is the best spanning tree? And best in which thing means some parameters should be there, right? And that parameter can be associated numerical label. And what is this numerical label? That this can be weight of the S, this can be distance between two vertices, okay? Time travel from one city to another. This can be cost, or suppose cost of road making between two cities or two places, or some other parameter it could be, right? So corresponding to this one, we want to minimize these things, right? So uh, minimal spanning tree will be the best spanning tree. Clear? There exist 8 spanning tree. Out of this, whatever the minimum spanning tree, that will give us the best spanning tree. Clear? And that minimization, or if it is a minimum, whatever it will connect all the vertices, because spanning tree does that. Okay. So every spanning tree is the least connected graph of subgraph of the graph, right? If G is this graph and the spanning tree is the least connected, if you disconnect anyone else, that will be disconnected, right?
Yes.
That's why I'm just saying least connected part of graph. Clear? So we want to find the best spanning tree corresponding to minimum of these parameters, right? And what is for that, these parameters should be given associated with every edge. So whatever these parameters are, in general we call as this weight of S. Okay. So a graph with the numerical labels on the edges, for example, this one you can just see, there is associated numerical label is given with every edge, and generally we represent this by W of EI. Weight of E1 is given as 2, E2 it is 3, E3 it is 5, for E4 5, for E5 4, for E6 7. This will be already given in the question, okay? Clear?
Yes.
So, and this, wherever this numerical label, these numerical label of this distance, whatever it is, weight are given, this type of graph is known as weighted graph. Okay. And for corresponding for a particular edge EI, this is represented by WFEI. This is weight of S, weight of W1, that is E1 is 2, E2 is 3, and so on, right? And how to find weight of the graph? Weight of graph will be total weight of these edges, right? So that will be the summation of all parameters, right? Clear? So this is your weighted graph, and this is weight. Yeah. So given is weight of G1 is given as 26. Out of this one, see if this graph is connected now only, right? If we remove E1, that will not be connected. But if we take spanning tree, that is least connected, right? That will optimize it, and that will connect every two vertices, right? There will be a path between every two vertices. Okay. So there are 8 number of spanning tree given as T1 to T8, this one, with the associated weight of the trees. Okay. Out of this one, we want minimum weight. We want a spanning tree with minimum weight, and that is known as minimum spanning tree. Clear? And which one is working as minimum?
Then T7.
T6 and T7
Yes.
both are having minimum, that is equal weight, and that is the minimum out of all these, right? So both are minimum spanning tree. Okay, either you can take it this one or this one. Okay, these are the least connected graph, least connected part of that G that connects every two vertices. Okay, and see here it was 26 for total weight, that is total weight of the graph, and here it is just 14. So it is minimizing our cost, right? That's why we are interested in minimum spanning tree. And definition is a spanning tree with minimum weight is known as minimum spanning tree. Clear? T6 and T7 are minimum spanning tree. Okay. Now, how to find this minimum spanning tree? Yes, there are two ways to find any spanning tree, starting with G, right? If you start with G, you remove those edges which are forming a cycle and keep doing that until you are getting connected acyclic graph, right? So even not on edge, that is not on cycle, so no need to remove it. You can remove this one, right? Even this one. Then you can remove this edge from this cycle and you are getting this one. Okay. So one spanning tree you got this like this. Or you can starting with G. Okay. Or the second method is start with these vertices and keep adding the edges from E, that is from G, from the graph G, such that you are getting the least connected graph. Okay, connected and acyclic graph. Suppose here you have this edge. So this one we got it. Right? Then you can add this one. You cannot add this one, otherwise it will form a cycle. Then this one you can add. You cannot add this edge, you can add this one. So this is also a spanning tree, starting with only vertices. Okay, you need to add these edges. So to get the minimum spanning tree, you can start with the vertices. One way is to do that, and keep adding the edges starting with the minimum of weights, right? Whatever the minimum out of all the weight, just add that. So first step is take all the vertices and take the edge with minimum parameter, minimum weight, minimum cost, minimum time, minimum distance, whatever it is. Tell me. Minimum is yes. Am I audible? Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yeah, tell me which one is minimum. I want to add an edge with minimum weight. Start with minimum, then next to that, then next to that. Right?
ma'am.
First
Two.
two, the edge with two weight, right? Two parameter. So even with two, or the just edge with two parameter. Next minimum means that
Three.
can be equal to or greater than two. So not any other two. So you can go for three, right? Second step will be again you draw these one. This is the edge two. This one. Yeah. Now three, right? Then next step will be
Five. Five.
five. Which five? This one or this one? Anything you can take it. Okay. So I'm just doing in the very first step only. I don't have any space. Yeah. So next is this one. Next is this one. You can add it, or you could add this one. Okay. So by adding at the time of third edge, you need to just take care about whether cycle formation is not occurring or not. Yes, right? It should not occur. Okay. Suppose there could be an edge from this vertex to this vertex. Okay. So we could not take that edge. Okay. So suppose we have in the graph G itself, we have 3 weight edges here. So we cannot take that. Okay. Because this will not form a tree, right? That's why either you can take this one or this one, both are same, right? 5. Next, this 5 you cannot take, right? Otherwise, the cycle formation will occur. Next is, yeah, there is 4 now. Why we are reading 5? Before 5, we have 4. So third step will be adding 4 weightages. Then next is 5. Either you can add this one or this one, right? You can say it. Weight will be contained. Okay. And another one is this one, this to this, this to this, this, right? 4, 5, 3, 2. Again, 14. Clear?
Yes.
Anyone? Any doubt? No? So whatever I have explained now, this is an algorithm that is start with minimum weight as and then keep adding those subsequent edges with the next minimum such that no cycle formation occurred. Okay. And you are getting connected graph. And how many edges will you will add? If the number of vertices are n, then n minus 1 edges will be there, right? Only then it will be tree, right? So for this 5 vertices, you have 4 edges. Clear? So this algorithm is known as Kruskal algorithm. Okay, connected weighted graph will be given, and we want to we want to find a graph that connects all the vertices. That means spanning tree, which minimize the edge weight, right? So for this problem, optimal solution will be minimum spanning tree, and the algorithm is by Kruskal algorithm for to find the minimum spanning tree for given connected weighted graph. Okay, so G is the connected weight graph. Okay, with the edges, if M is the size of G, so even A to N so on up to En. In non-decreasing order weight, this you can take it or not, doesn't matter. So T will be the minimum spanning tree, and how you can form this tree? Take the edge with minimum weight at the first edge of this tree. Second edge will be next minimum. Okay. For the subsequent, you will be taking up to n minus 1 number of edges such that no cycle formation will occur. Okay. With already selected edges. And finally, you can calculate the weight of the tree, and that will be minimum, right? And that will be what? Weight of these n minus 1 edges. Okay, some of these weights. Clear? Can you find minimum spanning tree for this graph, for this guide? How many spanning tree exist? 8 na? Out of that, by using Kruskal algorithm, try to find the minimum spanning tree. The first step is take the first edge as first is all the vertices, right? Choose first edge as the minimum weight. Minimum weight edge is D, right? Next minimum D to C or C to D, anything you can choose it, right? Next is again 2, but you cannot choose that, right? Why?
Then it will form cycle.
It will form a cycle that will not be no more a tree. Yeah. Next is tree, right? And then finally you are getting first step is to take all the vertices even with one weight, and this one you can choose this one with two. Next you cannot choose, so next to next will be three. Okay, and also three, one, two. So both are having 6 feet, right? And this graph kite has 12. Okay, so this is giving you the minimum connected graph that connects every two vertices, right? That is minimum spanning tree. Okay, and this is the Kruskal algorithm. First choose even with minimum weight, that is this one, BD. Next, you can choose any of this one or this one. This one I have chosen here, and the next one I have chosen here. And next is, because this is forming a cycle, the logical next to this one too. That's why you cannot choose that. Instead, you can choose this one. Okay, A to D. Finally, you're getting this one, and if at this stage you choose this one, then you're getting this one. And both are the minimum spanning tree with weight as 1 plus 2 plus 3, that is 6. Is that clear? Everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Next, try to write all the steps for this one. To find minimum spanning tree for this graph by using Kruskal algorithm. Just find it. The first step will be first step is to take all the vertices. First edge,
Ma'am, first will be 1,
1. Next,
and then it will be 7.
7. Next, we have 2 now. Next minimum. It doesn't matter we are having the connected edge or not. Okay. That is another algorithm. For Kruskal, you need to choose the minimum, then next to that. Okay. So the minimum is 1, then we have 2 now. For 3, we have this 3, right? Not forming any cycle with 1 and 2. We can choose this. What about 4? 4 we can choose it, not forming any cycle with already selected edges. 5. Can we choose 5?
No, ma'am, it will form cycle.
No, it will form a cycle. 6, also not. 5 gone. 6 gone.
7.
7. 7 we can choose. 8 we cannot. 9 we cannot. 10 we can choose. Okay. This is gone. This is gone. So finally, we are getting this one. And the weight of this tree is 27. Clear? Any other doubt? Whatever you are selecting, that is start with any vertex. There is one more algorithm to do this to get the spanning tree, minimum spanning tree. Start with any vertex. Okay, that algorithm is known as Prim's algorithm. That is not in your syllabus now. Prim's algorithm. Start with any vertex, either this one, or this one, and choose the minimum weight as incident to that. So out of these three edges are incident to that. Out of these, minimum is 2. Okay. Now you have 2 vertices, right? This one already selected, and this one now we have taken it. So out of these, whatever the minimum, these vertices, whatever the edges are incident to these, so we are left with 2 this one, and with this one many, right? Many edges. So out of this one, whatever the minimum one, you will select that. So minimum out of this one, 4 is the minimum. So you will select this. Now you got 3 number of vertices, right? These 3. So select that as with the minimum incident to these 3 vertices. So 3, right? Now you got 4 vertices, right? Out of 4, you have many edges incident to these vertices. You cannot take 5, yeah, such that no cycle formation should occur. Okay, so 5 will form a cycle, 6 also will form a cycle. You cannot take, then it has 12, 10, 9, 8, 7. Whatever the minimum, next minimum, 7. Okay, then you have 5 vertices. Now the minimum is 1. Now the minimum is, so that no cycle formation occur, 10. 9 is forming a cycle, 8 is forming a cycle, and these 2 already cancelled, right? Now these cancel. So this one. So again, by using Prim's algorithm, you got the same spanning tree. Okay. So anyways, that is not the part of your syllabus. And in MCQ, they can just ask that minimum, what is the weight of minimum spanning tree and so on. So by any algorithm, you can find that, right? Finally, you need to just get the weight. Okay. Clear? And Kruskal algorithm is to find the minimum spanning tree. They could also give the statement that Kruskal algorithm find the shortest path or something else. Okay. Next is shortest path. You're given a vertex and you are asked to find the shortest path from you to every other vertex. Okay. Or distance from you to every other vertex of the G, graph G. Okay. So whenever it was not a weighted graph, we considered every weight, that is every edge has one weight, right? One distance. We counted like this, right? One length. Okay. So for example, A, B, C. So what is the distance between A and C? You took the shortest one. If you have directly, then you took this direct path, right? Otherwise, via B. And we counted this is having distance 2. Now, for a labeled graph, or you can just say for this weighted graph, it will depend on the weight of the edges, right? Suppose you have A to C directly. If it was not a weighted graph, then you could say the distance between A and C is what? 1. But now, which path you will take? You have A to B, B to C. It is 2 plus 8, and now it is 11. So which path is shorter one?
Ma'am, ABC.
Via B, right? This path. This is because of this weight given to these edges. Okay. So that's how we will find the shortest path here. Okay. So a path with the least length, and least length where in the connected weighting graph. Okay. So how can we find the shortest route from one location to another location? For example, A is one location, B is, C is any other location. So how we can find it? By finding the shortest route. Okay. Shortest path, shortest distance, right? And this can be done by using an algorithm that is Dijkstra algorithm. J is silent over here. Dijkstra. Okay. Dijkstra. Yeah, one more thing, distance from U to Z. This is in a connected weighted graph is the minimum sum of weight on the edges on U to V path. For example, this minimum weight you will take. Here it was the directly adjacent A and C, but the weight is 11 and here weight is 10. That's why minimum weight you could choose A, B to C, right? That's how you took it, right? So this is now distance and the path will be A, B, C. And the distance from A to C will be 10. Clear? Okay. Now to find the shortest route or the distance from any vertex to any other vertex, we can use this algorithm to find the distance from one vertex. Okay, the weighted graph will be given either or the weighted diagraph will be given. In weighted diagraph, there may not exist the direct path, right? May or may not exist. But here, if it is connected, obviously there have to be exist. Okay, with undirected graph. So starting point you can take as u. You want to find the distance from u to every other point. Okay. And weight of xy edge or weight of any edge E is denoted by W of V or W of xy. And if initially what we do, if there is no direct adjacent, that is A we have here, B we have here, A to C, and that is B to C we have here. Here we have 2, here we have 3. So weight of this edge A to B, weight of AB is 2, CB is 3. What about weight of AC? Not given, na? When it is not given, you take this as infinite, undefined, right? If any edge is not present in the graph, you can take this weight of this edge is infinite. Okay? Clear? And this is the procedure how to find the distance from one vertex to every other vertex. To start is we start with taking any set with u. So initially it will be having just u. Okay, and yeah, there is one more notation that is t of u or t of z. T of z is the tentative distance from u to z. Clear? T for tentative. This is denoting the tentative distance from U to Z. Okay, distance from U to Z. But why this is tentative? This may change. Okay, that's why we are not denoting by DUZ. Here, got it?
What
Now,
is the meaning of
initially,
tentative?
yes,
Meaning of tentative.
tentative is just tentative, whatever the meaning of tentative. Tentative distance means it may change, and obviously it will change. Okay, initially we are defining by TZ. Okay, and if we proceed further, it may change. That's why we are just saying this is tentative distance. Okay, clear? This is not fixed. This is
Means
not
variable distance we are taking.
variable. Huh? Yeah, you can just say variable. Okay. So tentative distance from U to U, this is 0. Obviously, we are at U, right? We don't have to go anywhere. So this is giving you the tentative distance from U to U, and this is the distance from U to U. Okay. So if someone asks you what is TU, that will be TUU 0. Clear? So initially we are starting with u, so tu will be 0. Tz is we are defining from u to all those which are adjacent to u. Okay, we are taking the weight of all these edges. Okay, Tz is the w weight, w for weight, u to z. Okay, if any vertex which is not directly adjacent to u, this is your u, and this is your a, b, c, d, e. So you have u to a, something will be given u to b, something is given u to d, something is given u to c. Also, that is u to a is t of a. Okay, and the weight of u to b will be t of b. U to D will be T of D. Okay. U to C will be T of C. And what about this is E, T of E. Finally, not C. This is your C. Yeah. What about T of C? T of C initially it should be weight of U to C, right? But U to C as is not given, so what we take initially?
Infinite.
Infinite, right? So we define this tentative distance from U to C because till now we don't know, right? We proceed further via some other vertex, then we might find, but till now we don't know, right? That is your infinite. Clear?
Yes.
Yeah. Out of all these calculated tentative distance T of A, B, C, A, B, D, C, take that point which is having the minimum distance. Okay, from you. So minimum weight will give you minimum tentative distance, right? So whatever minimum, for example, it is having 2, it is having 1, it is having 3, it is having 5. So what you will take? B now.
Yes, ma'am.
B is the minimum. So just add B to this set with U. Okay. So select that vertex that should not be equal to U, or that should be outside from S. We have started S with U only, such that tentative distance is minimum of all those distances, right? So with minimum tentative distance, you can choose that point and add to S. Now S, if B is at minimum weight or minimum distance or minimum anything, then now after this point, what will be S, U and B, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Then from B, if you have added B now you take B. Via B, you can explore all the vertices, okay, which are adjacent to B and find the tentative distance from U to all those points. Because U to B you already know, and you can directly get the distance from tentative distance from B to any other point which are adjacent to this one, right? By just taking the weight of that edge. For example, B to C you have 5. So tentative distance from U to C, earlier it was infinite because you didn't have any direct adjacency. Now from B to C you got as 5 and from U to B you have 1. So take the minimum of infinite and 1 plus 5, right? B से explore कर रहे हैं सभी points को, right? So from B to C we got as 5 and just add it to from U to B. So that will be 6. What is the minimum of infinite and 6?
6.
That will be your tentative distance from U to C. Clear? Now you got 6. Earlier it was infinite. So that's how it might change. Okay? Clear? And keep doing that. This one. Explore all the vertices from the added vertex, whatever it is added. Okay. Then next added vertex will be which is having the minimum tentative distance from you, right? That you will take and add into S. And then explore all the vertices which are adjacent to the newly added vertex. Clear? So like this, you will be getting finally S is equal to vertex set of that graph. Clear? So there you can end it, stop it, and finally you can define the distance or path, whatever you want. Okay? Clear? And whatever at this stage, whatever the tentative distance from U to V, that is your distance from U to V. Clear?
Yes.
Is there any doubt? Or insert this one, then just take it like this. Yeah, and next point I didn't. Yeah, explore all the edges from V, whatever the newly added vertex in is, and update TZ to minimum of TZ, whatever it was earlier defined. Now, via V you are selecting, right? U to V already defined, U to V already defined, and via V you are selecting. Okay, so U to other points, whatever it was defined, take the minimum of that distance, that tentative distance with T of U, T of V. T of V is this weight as, right? Plus weight of V to every other